have a look at this, you'll see who the other speakers are going to be. And again, I think we'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves when they're up in front of you. And I'll try to keep to my time limit here. So there are three questions I wanted to ask here. Why have religious freedom cases failed in the United States courts? That is, religious freedom cases associated with Indigenous revered and sacred places. Number two, what are the other strategies available to guarantee respect for these, what I would prefer to call revered beings, otherwise known as sacred places? And why should all of this matter? Why should this matter to all the citizens and residents of Flagstaff? All right. Why have religious freedom cases failed in the U.S. courts? Well, the Snowbowl cases are in many people, or at least in some people's memory here in Flagstaff. I'm not sure how many people are aware of some of the earlier cases, beginning with the case of Wilson versus Block in 1983. This was a lawsuit brought during the first phase of expansion of the Snowbowl ski area. And this was brought on the basis of freedom of religion. The courts in this case ruled that the religious practices of Navajo and Hopi plaintiffs were not burdened because they were still allowed to access the peaks, the very top of the mountain. The court decided to construct an artificial definition of and limitation of the sacredness of the mountain to the peaks. And since the ski area is down at the bottom, not a problem. The case that most people may be aware of here, since it's in more recent memory, Navajo Nation and others versus U.S. Forest Service, 2008. In this case, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in their final ruling asserted that, again, that the spraying of treated wastewater on this sacred mountain did not burden the native practice of religion, not only Navajo and Hopi, but 11 other native tribes and peoples, did not burden their practice of religion because nobody was being coerced to violate their religion, and nobody was being punished for practicing their religion. And I'll have more to say about that odd definition in a moment. They also, the Court of Appeals also said that the treated effluent does not affect the plaintiff's practice of religion, only their subjective, emotional, religious experience. I could go on and on about these, but I only have 15 minutes, so I'm going to keep going. All right, there are a number of precedents for this ruling. One of them is the Smith case, which involved the Native American Church, whose members were still being arrested and prosecuted for the possession of peyote for sacramental use. And in that ruling, Justice Scalia said that the United States can no longer afford the luxury of requiring the government to prove it has a compelling state interest when its actions burden the practice, religious practice or belief. I'm forced because of time constraints to kind of toss these things out here, and you'll have access to this PowerPoint. You can look it up and do some more research on it if you like. But the rock solid precedent for the Forest Service 2008 Snowbowl ruling was Ling versus Northwest Indian Cemetery, in which the Supreme Court established this idea that the US government cannot be prohibited from burdening the practice of religion, getting in the way of practice of religion by its actions, unless it either coerces someone to violate their religion or punishes someone for practicing their religion. This was a narrowing of the standards of what constitutes a burden on the practice of religion. Even more importantly, I think that US Supreme Court in 1988 said that the United States as a property owner is not obliged to respect the religious practices, anyone's religious practices in making its land use decisions. So the United States, in this case, the US Forest Service, acting on behalf of the United States, is constructed as a property owner. And just like you know, if my neighbor has some religious restriction that they want to impose on my property, I have no obligation to fulfill that request. And so the court ruled that in other words, property rights are supreme here. All of this goes back to a long history of U.S. law. In 1888, an executive action, not a law of the country, permitted the punishment of Native people for practicing their religion. Yeah, 1888. This was never challenged. So it establishes this history of the federal government claiming the authority to meddle and regulate all aspects of Indian life. It all goes back to the doctrine of discovery, which is one of the most bizarre facets of U.S. Indian law and policy. The doctrine of discovery, to paraphrase, states that when a Christian nation discovers territory inhabited by non-Christian or heathen people, that's the word they use, it can assume possession of that territory by authority of God. I'm sure that doesn't sound to anyone like a principle in U.S. law, and that's because it isn't. It originally comes from Pope Nicholas V in 1454, who was giving Christian nations the moral and legal authority to engage in the Crusades. But that pronouncement by a Catholic Pope in 1454 is cited by U.S. Chief Justice John Marshall in the case of Johnson v. McIntosh, 1821. And that principle has now been rooted, deeply rooted in U.S. law ever since. It essentially means that Native people, indigenous people within the boundaries of the United States are considered by U.S. law to have only the right to occupy their lands. They do not possess or own the lands the way another nation might. I'm out of time interest. I'm going to have to skip the quotes here, but you can go back and read them later. So my conclusion from this is that the First Amendment guarantee of religion was actually designed to allow divergent Protestant denominations to coexist in the United States. Over time, other varieties of religious belief and practice were brought under that umbrella. Catholicism, Judaism, Islam, the Amish, even more other religions like Santeria. But the US and Canada, courts in the US and Canada have never, and I've studied this, protected Indigenous sacred relationships embodied in places. You can't find one instance. Practices of thousands of years standing, especially when to do so would interfere with the management of public lands for recreation or profit. I'm going to just, again, quickly highlight some other strategies that are being employed by Indigenous people and nations and their allies. Endangered Species Act. One case was successful in Canada on the basis of subsistence rights. There's a whole new body of law being developed in Native nations, not just in the US, but internationally, based on the rights of nature, the rights of a particular river or mountain. And then cases brought on the basis of public health, which includes some of the cases that have been brought with relation to Snowbowl. Okay, to finish up, oh my gosh, 15 minutes is really short. Why should all this matter to the citizens and residents of Flagstaff? 1, social harmony. This presents an opportunity to build a distinctive, positive, and innovative border town community. I know some people in Flagstaff prefer to not use the term border town, but let's be real. Respect for elders. Indigenous people in this region have maintained relationships with this mountain for hundreds of generations. Wouldn't it be better to support those relationships and learn from them rather than continue to irritate and offend your neighbors and elder relatives? Public health. Drought has been intensifying steadily. Snowbowl is going to have to use increasing proportions of wastewater for snowmaking to compensate for decreasing and very often zero natural snow. This, as far as I understand, is in violation of the contract, but also increases dangers to public environment and environmental health. Responsible management would suggest adapting now to forestall further harm. Finally, avoiding bankruptcy. We can work together to find a path that avoids bankruptcy for the city. Nobody wants that, but also avoids social, environmental, and public health bankruptcy. I did it. Okay. I think we're going to save questions and comments for the end. I'm hoping Mona is here. Mona, are you here? Okay. All right. Mona expressed some anxiety to me about the technology. I'm going to go ahead and text her and see if we can get that ironed out. But I guess maybe in this case, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you then, Sean.
Thank you, Chris. Can you see me? Because I can't see you.
We can only see you from the eyes up.
Okay, so eyes up. So I need to come down.
Yeah.
How's that?
Someplace in the middle of those two.
Okay, let's see here. Okay. How's that? Better?
Now it's too low.
Let me go this way. Like you said, technology is
right
not
there,
our,
right there, right
There,
there,
there you go. Hold it right
all
there.
right, right there.
right there, right there.
She Sean Mulford Yunish, yeah. Tutna Sahni Inchla. Ma Idesh Gijni Bushish Chin, Clash Chi that should che, Tut Sohni, that should nale. Thank you, Chris, for giving a little bit of that background into the history and bringing up the papal bulls. I think the papal bulls is the problem that we're having here as Indigenous peoples, not only here in Flagstaff, but all over the world. Those bulls have been causing a problem for God's creation and the Aboriginal Indigenous peoples of the earth since its creation in the late 1400s. You know, a lot of those bulls are about domination. Domo, is the root of that. Domo, domination. And we learned a lot about that from Mr. Stephen Newcomb, who has spent his life to decipher what all of that Latin writing means. And so we need to dig into it deeper. But I think we've dug into it enough to understand that when the people came here, they thought they were superior to us as Aboriginal Indigenous people, and that they were above us. They were human and we were not. And not only that, the scarier part is they felt they were above the earth, God's creation. They came here to not only try to baptize us as Aboriginal Indigenous people, but to baptize the land and to take these lands under the Christian nation. And so they came here with a very flawed mindset. They came here with an illness. I think one of the Lakota says the sickness of the mind is what they came here with. I know another elder said they came here with a Bible in one hand and a sword in another. And that's how they came to our lands. And we're peaceful people. We have respect for the creation. We have respect for each other. So I don't think that they understood that. They had no respect for us and no respect for God's creation. So that's how they came here. And as I saw Trump walk out across the White House and hold up his Bible with all the military people clearing the way for him, I say, it looks like they still have the Bible in one hand, and rather than a sword, they have military machine gun in the other. So they've upgraded their artillery here. And so we have to look at that, because we have to, when we're addressing Snowbowl, we have to understand who we're dealing with. What is going on here? Who are these people that came here? And I think by understanding that domination mindset, we begin to understand who they are. So how do we respond to these people? You know, they're killers. That's the problem. Is if you're not in agreement with them, they can more than willing take the gun to you, or anything else, as Putin is a pill. You know, he'll take the pill to you if you're not in agreement with him. But that's the type of people that we're dealing with. So how do we respond to that as Aboriginal Indigenous peoples? You know, the elders always say we have our ceremonies, we have our way of life. We respond with our prayer and our understanding of who we are. You know, the elders many years ago drew a line in the sand. And when we were talking to the federal agents, and they said, you all have gone too far. And they drew that line in the sand and they said, no more. That's it. You pushed us back only this far. From here, we just stand on our way of life. And I think that's what we have to do as Indigenous people, because the people that we're dealing with, you know, in 1400s is the same people we're dealing with now, except for it's represented by the corporation Arizona Snowbowl. You know, that is a that corporation represents and symbolizes everything from those bulls that were written by the Pope. And so here they are again, trampling on our way of life. So what I would like to see specifically from the city of Flagstaff is a truth and reconciliation movement. You know, we got to tell the truth about these things. You know, our way of life, they have no right to regulate us. We have our own ways, our own language, our own ceremonies, our own governance, our own education system. We have those things, and they can regulate their own people, but they shouldn't be regulating us or trying to regulate us. And they're on our sacred land, and they have to remember that. It's not their land, it's not our land. The land belongs to the Creator. And that's the distinction that we as Aboriginal Indigenous people understand, is it's the Creator's land, the sacred creation. You know, we have to put our prayer down to even talk about it. That's how sacred that area is. And so we have to continue to do those type of things. You know, I sat with Jamie Whalen and Coral Evans many years ago. I said, you guys have to terminate that contract. It's violating our rights as Indigenous people, and it's violating the earth. The nitrogen levels in that reclaimed wastewater are so high. I think one scientist said it's 8,000 times what that mountain should be having. And sooner or later, the ecosystem is going to change on that mountain because of that high nitrogen level. The native plants are going to start being taken over by the invasive species because they can't survive in that high of nitrogen level. So I told them we have to terminate this contract. And, you know, at that time, Jamie Whalen was saying, you know, oh, you know, if it was if I was on the council at that time, I wouldn't have voted that way. And, you know, I understand and respect and all these things. So I said, well, you're on the council now. So you have all the authority to do it. And I kept pushing them during that meeting. And she finally snapped and said, we are not going to terminate a valid contract. And I said, well, thank you for that, because at least you jumped off the fence, and we can we can know what side you dropped off on. Hold on. And so, and you know, I think the other thing was Coral Evans was the mayor at that time. I think she's still the mayor now. She said, Sean, I'm what was offended by the fact that you include us as Black people in the you people. We were brought here as slaves against our will. And so I said, well, Coral, you need to understand that if you, as a people that's oppressed, that you should not become the oppressor. So that she should be understanding us a little bit better. And so we need to terminate this contract because it is not a valid contract. It does not adhere to the rules of the Mother Earth, of the land, of the natural creation, the way we're supposed to live on this earth. It's violating the natural law. It's violating our rights as Indigenous people. It is not a valid contract. And there's many other things that Snowbowl is doing, violating that contract with the reclaimed wastewater. And as we kind of move forward, we need to get into that. But the other thing we need to talk about is how do we move forward? As you said, community, how do we do that? And it brought talking, you know, just saying that, Chris, brought to my mind a story of Muhammad Ali and Billy Crystal. You know, and Billy Crystal was telling the story. He said, you know, he became friends, real good friends with Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali used to call him little brother. And one day, Muhammad Ali said, you know, I run and work out in the morning at this golf course. And come join me. Let's go over there. We'll exercise. And Billy Crystal said, well, I can't go there, champ. And he goes, what do you mean? He said, it's restricted. They don't allow Jewish people in there. And Muhammad Ali said, I didn't know that. He said, you know, I'm a Black Muslim and they let me run in there. And so Billy Crystal said, well, they don't allow the Jews in there. And then Muhammad Ali said, well, I won't go there anymore. And so he didn't. He stopped. And I think as Indigenous people, that's what we're trying to say is all the other races all over the world, the nation of the people that still respect the natural law, still respect God's creation, still respect brotherhood, sisterhood, our understanding of being from the same family, that they should understand that as Indigenous people, we're saying that that place is violating and abusing us as long as it's there. And I hope that the people can take that and do what Muhammad Ali did and say, I will not go there anymore, and follow that voice, that power in a human being's voice. I will not go there anymore, because that's what we need. We need to get rid of that mountain capital partner, Arizona Snowbowl, and they're not good for the community. They're always bringing us these problems of a divisive community, and they're not good for the earth because they're destroying the ecosystem up there, and they're just there for their own money. So, and they're not good for the Flagstaff and the Forest Service. They're always throwing them into litigation. So we have to get rid of those things. And the only thing that thing survives off of is money. That's all it eats, money. If you take the money away from those people, they don't exist anymore. And so I hope the people join us as Aboriginal Indigenous peoples on our own land, living our own way of life. I hope they join us to keep their dollars away from there, just like Muhammad Ali said. He said, I will not go there anymore. And he didn't. And that was a powerful, powerful thing. So that's where we stand. That's where we're at. We know who we're dealing with here. And there's plenty of ways to terminate the reclaimed wastewater contract. The city has all the authority to do it. Don't let them fool you. We had a legal review of it. And one of the things is, you know, with climate change, and I know they've kicked this around, is that they can restructure their uses. And with the lack of water, they can pull that no problem. And so Arizona Snowbowl is going to try to make that place a Disneyland up there. And we ask you around the world to support us and to stand with us on that line the elders drew a long time ago. They drew that line and then they said, from here, all we're going to do is stand on our way of life. So we have to, as human beings, make the change now. You know, we're running around with masks on and face shields. It's crazy. What's happening is we are becoming, and we are victims of change right now because we have refused to realign our values and our way of life with the earth. And there are consequences when you do that. And we're seeing that right now as soon as we're wearing masks. You know, we were told we were going to be drinking from a crystal container in our prophecies. And sure enough, we're running around with bottled water. I asked the elders, is that bottled water? And they said, yeah, we've interpreted it as because they probably didn't have plastic back in the earlier days. So now, as Indigenous people, we see what's coming in the future, and the mask is just a hint at that. That's why we're standing there and saying, no more. You have to stand with us. And these people, if they want to survive in the future, and if we want to survive in the future, they're going to have to listen to us, and they're going to have to listen to the earth. And so we have a lot more to say, but I think that Arizona Snowbowl, the city of Flagstaff, they have to terminate what they're doing up there and work with us in a better way. That's what we see. And so the other point I wanted to make is to all the Indigenous people out there in the world, the Indigenous People Day, you know, they had the Removal Act. They remove us from our lands and they put us into a reservation and they kept us there. And this Indigenous Peoples Day is kind of the same thing. When we wake up in the morning, I'm sure the sun just doesn't rise and shine on the Christian people. It shines on all life. And so what they're trying to do with these Indigenous People Day is to narrow us down to one day, just like the reservation. Let's put those Native people over here just in the reservation, keep them over there. Let's just give them one day, give them that day. We'll put the mic on them and let them talk. But every day we'll be saying the same message. Every day we'll be putting our corn pollen out, and cornmeal, and our tobaccos. And every day is our day. And I have to say that in a strong way because we're about healing here as Indigenous people. We're peaceful people. We're not like that. And so we're going to pray every single day for their healing. And that's what that mountain represents, a healing. So I have a lot more to say, but I'm going to just say that much because I think Mona probably hopefully got on now. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Mona, are you there? I can't really see the list. Okay, apparently not, but that's fine. We wanted to leave some time for discussion. I would just maybe add a couple of things to what my brother has just been talking about. I guess I'm also reminded of how the descendants of people from Africa brought into slavery to this country in the 1960s were always being told, be patient, wait, things will work out in time. And I think about that whenever I'm faced with this response that, well, that lease is going to come up in 2032 or 2034, whenever that is, and just be patient until then, and we can maybe have a better process to revisit that decision. And what we're seeing here is ongoing actions by a government that are not just harming a place that we value, but harming and expressing contempt for holy beings. I mean, I'm not Hopi. I can't pretend to explain the inner workings of it, but I've studied the law. And again, as I tried to mention before, freedom of religion in the US was originally all about being a traffic cop between Congregationalists and Episcopalians. It then expanded so that Catholics were brought under the tent, and Jews and Muslims and other people. The concept of a sacred place from a European perspective gains a little bit of traction in that there are some protections, for example, for a church. And I remember, some of the testimony and public comments during the more recent Snowbowl legal case had to do with, this is like peeing on a church. It's not like peeing on a church. It's like peeing on my grandmother. Only it's even worse than that, because this isn't just a grandmother. And so there are ways in which the construction of US law and freedom of religion is just not willing to go beyond what its familiar definitions and understanding of what religion is. And that's on purpose. That's on purpose because, as Sean is mentioning, there's too much money involved here. And that just distorts and shuts the door on the kind of understanding that should be possible. We've been living next to each other for a long time now. We should be able to come to terms. All right, I'm doing my little sermon. Sean, how about we just see if we've got comments from either from ICF members or anybody else out there?
I think that would be good.
Yeah. All right, just remember you have to turn your mic on if you want to speak.
Sean, when you were talking about the illness that the white colonists brought with them, the illness of the mind, I don't really want to get into it much. It's personal, traumatic details of mine, but a lot of things have happened in my life, and to be completely honest, I'm pretty detached from the United States. It's not a place I can ever consider my home. If anything, nature and the planet, and I guess the realm outside of what people call civilization, that's my home. So I come from a different place, I guess, and I think from what I've, watching all the presentations so far today, it's a lot closer to where you as Native people come from than, say, the white settlers. And when you were talking about the illness, it reminded me that I'm pretty sensitive to the corruption of humanity. And it's like a miasma that's, at this point, it's pervaded the United States. It's like a disease, kind of like the coronavirus, except you can't really see its effects the same way, but it drives people's actions, like the incessant desire to pervert and desecrate the earth for the sake of a profit. I'm still trying to figure out how to connect with humans after everything that's happened. But I appreciate what you were saying. It speaks pretty profoundly to my own experience. I know that I come from a different place. My circumstances are different. I'm not Indigenous, and I won't pretend to be, but there are a lot of similarities and parallels from what you were speaking to my own experience. So I just wanted to say I appreciate you speaking up and telling the truth, because I've experienced the same thing. I mean, as not as as an Indigenous person, but as someone who was basically violated by their own home nation. And I know that this might offend some people. I do not consider the United States my home. I have never felt any sort of connection to this nation. Um, but at the same time, it's also my truth. So I just, again, thank you for speaking up about what's really going on here. And I'd like to try to figure out, I'm still trying to figure out how I could be supportive, but I think I have some things I need to work through as well.
Well, thank you for that. You know, I was asked by Loyola Law University to talk to their class of human rights attorneys many years ago, and they started with that question. You know, I said I'm not a presenter. You know, I'm not that way. Let's just have a dialogue. So ask me a question. And the professor got up, the head of the department, and she said, "These are all young human rights attorneys sitting in front of you. They're going to work on an international level. Can you give them some idea and direction on the work that you're doing?" And I said, "Well, that's a good question." And I said, "Number one thing, know who you're dealing with." You know, to the young people in that room, I said, "You have to know who you're dealing with." I spent a lot of time, and I use the example of the peaks. I said, I spent a lot of time on that issue. And I went to the Forest Service and talked to them about how it's going to affect us as Indigenous people. And they kept moving forward. Comments periods went, and they just kept going. And I said, "Man, they don't care about us." And I said, "Well, maybe they care about the earth." And we talked about the nitrogen, the phosphates, all of those things, and how it was going to hurt the eco environment up there. And they kept going. Then I said, "Well, maybe they care about their own kids, because it's not us, our native kids, going up there and skiing. It's going to be their kids ingesting that reclaimed wastewater, and it's going to affect their health." And they just kept going. And so I told this group of young attorneys, I said, you know, it finally dawned on me at that point. I'm expecting a human response from something that isn't human. That's been my mistake all these years. The city of Flagstaff is not human. It's a municipal entity. The United States of America is not a human. It's a governmental entity. Arizona Snowbowl is not a human. It's a corporate entity. And I'm treating these things, these its, like I'm expecting compassion, love, understanding from it. And it wasn't happening. And I said, that's my problem. I wasted a long time on this issue, not knowing who I was dealing with. And so listening to your comment, it really brings that story to my mind. When we're looking for love and compassion and respect, we can't look to governments. We can't look to corporations for that. We can only look to each other, eye to eye and breath to breath, as human beings, the five-finger ones, and the two-legged, the four-legged, the winged, the crawls, all those. We need to connect with that, because that's the real world, that's the real life, the way God had gave us. And so thank you for that, reminding me about that story.
If I could tag on to that real quick. The first time I believe that I met Sean was up at the Forest Service building here in Flagstaff, when they were having comments from I think it was the Nehatatli Association on the ski lift expansion that's going on right now. And I learned a lot that day. I saw some very profound and moving testimony by medicine people to the panel of Forest Service administrators that was there to officially listen. And you wouldn't believe how they had learned to express how moved they were and how impressed they were and how they would really take this into account. And they went ahead and approved it anyway, without, I'm sure without any hesitation. I began to realize that what I was watching that day was a performance of the appearance of paying attention and the appearance of responding as a human being. I'm sure the decisions had already been made and that this was a formality. And so that's something we really have to understand and deal with.
Yeah, I get that. A lot of my experience was with basically the smoke and mirrors of of the United States bureaucracy. And I can only imagine how much harder it is for people of Indigenous heritage. They've been dealing with this for hundreds of years.
Well, we have to remind ourselves, when they came here, they didn't put all of this land on their shoulder and swim back across the ocean with it. We're still here, and the land is still here. Only in our mind are they trying to separate us. So we have a spiritual responsibility to that mountain forever. But they're trying to draw those lines and say, this is ours, this is yours. Well, we don't recognize that. We recognize our rights the Creator gave us, and we recognize our responsibilities the way the Creator gave us. And that's what we got to do. Now what we need from the people is we need to point ourselves all in the same direction with the earth. I go up there to Snowbowl just to check on them. And it really does something to me when I see a native person come skiing down that hill, fully knowing that it's violating their rights, their grandma's rights, their grandpa's rights, their ancestors' rights. And but they just have put themselves in that place where they're doing that. It really saddens me when I see that. And so I think as Native people, we have to point all of ourselves in the right direction too. Not just
so
Indian
Sean, I'm gonna go ahead and take a pause here. There's some information in the chat. I don't know if Chris, do you want to read those? You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if I have time to read all of these comments. I have been reading them. Several of them, however, are on the same theme, which is what can we do? What can we do as either citizens of Flagstaff or residents of Flagstaff to assist in this ending the lease? Sean, I'll hand that over to you.
They can vote the new people in that are serious about their life and serious about their grandchildren's life, and are serious about restoring the beauty of the land. We get a lot of candidates that sit there and they play politics, but we don't play politics with our sacred areas. We can stand up to politics, but that's about it. But the white people, the non-Indian people, the American people, they can vote and they can put in the people to change that reclaimed wastewater contract, because they do have the authority to terminate that in many, many ways without liability. And so that's what they can do. And the second thing they can do is withhold their money from there. Because like I said, the only thing that company survives on is money. And those two things are going to be really instrumental in turning this around. And for those that would do that and support that, I say, yeah, thank you. We need to be together on this.
Right. I do think that that city council is charged with being responsive to the public. And so enough pressure coming from the public could help in, I'm glad, Sean, that the way you just put that is that the contract can be changed without liability, because I think it just takes more committed and perhaps a little bit more creative legal investigation, legal work. Because so far, Indigenous Circle, what we've been presented with is that there's no alternative. Either the contract gets canceled and the city gets sued into bankruptcy, or we wait till 2032. And what I've learned from talking to you is no, it's not at all that cut and dried.
Absolutely. Like we said, if the city is out of water because of climate change or needs to do things, they can make whatever decisions necessary to protect the future. And I think that's what they should do. It's simple. It's an easy way to go, but it's the money that they want.
Hey, Sean and Chris, this is Adam, Vice Mayor Shimoni, and I just want to say thank you for this conversation. And Sean, I'm going to look into the things you brought up. I'm really interested in learning more about that and what other possibilities there might be. And just wanted to express gratitude. And Chris, like you mentioned, engaging with your elected officials, holding us accountable. We represent you, coming to our council meetings on Tuesdays and submitting public comments. Get involved. We need to work together towards the things that we want to see done. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Adam. We're all living here together, and we're going to have to figure out a way to solve this together. And I think the time is way long past for those antagonisms. For that antagonistic approach to be the only thing that's going on here. Okay, let's see. I'll try to read some of the other comments. I don't know how far back to go. A lot of the people who use Snowbowl come from Phoenix. So that adds another dimension in terms of trying to create awareness and reduce the revenue flow.
I should also mention about Phoenix, a lot of the mentality of people there, it's quite different from Flagstaff.
Yeah.
This is Rose again. I want to just enter the space again with that. I know we're trying to respect everybody's time, and our next speakers are going to be on in about 3 minutes. So thank you for all the comments, and I really appreciate all the support. These are the kinds of conversations that we need in our community for us to really understand each other. It may be uncomfortable to some, and but we just ask you to listen and to try to put yourselves in the situation that our people are in trying to voice their concerns for the mountain, for the land, for the environment. I mean, we're just trampling it to death, it seems like, because of the huge drain on the earth. And so I just want us to have that conversation. And how do we stop doing that? How do we stop thinking about just the gratification of what that kind of thought, that corporate thought, and that capitalism, how that has really put our relationship and our kinship in danger of not even being there. So these are some things that I was thinking about. Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. we're recording this, so we're hopeful that we can get it out to people who haven't seen it or are willing to share it. So I just want to just let you know that. So it should be, I'll be working on getting those together later this week. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right, thank you, Rose.
Thank you. Chris, do we get off?
It appears so. I think they're going to pretty quickly shut down and move to the other one.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
Well,
I'll
we'll be in
love you
touch.
later. Thank you.
Yep.